All right. So I'm not making a podcast this evening. This is what do you call it in music? Intermezzo? Something in between. Let me pop open a beer here. What am I drinking tonight, by the way? Hold on, let me figure this out. Oh. C minus, as my brother calls them. Of course, light. Actually, it's kind of a favorite of mine, but I can't be enjoying it when I get back to Japan. I won't miss it. Kirin is my favorite. But to the point, wasn't. This was not my podcast night. My podcast night is becoming Thursday nights. I wanted to start this up because I had a few things on my mind that I wanted to share. I need my rocks. Okay, these rocks on this table over here, I use these to count my laps through the desert. I've got a course that I've established, and I try to make 10 laps a day, which is about 5 miles. And but sometimes I can do up to 15. So I have, okay, there was one thing I wanted to talk about. I remember that. Wasn't there a couple of other things? Maybe they'll come to mind. So I guess I'll just start with one rock. I think there were 3. I just put 3 out and see if it'll come back to me. And I have a sip of my beer first as the fire begins to burn in earnest. All right. A hearty shout out to my compatriots in the Gaijin Twitter podcast collective. You folks are becoming a real catalyst to me, even more so than the JVlog community. I'm not the type of person who dwells on the past. I don't like telling stories of the past necessarily, and I don't like looking over my shoulder. But it's hard not to compare what's happening now with my grateful inclusion in this group with what I knew before, if only as a cautionary tale and a notice of the change that's happened in myself, insofar as that I'm able to recognize the wonder of having a community, and I'm not going to let this one pass. I didn't avail myself of my membership in the JVlog community. I was, as I've said before, peripheral to that community. At the time, I thought I was being aloof in my own way, different from the rest in that very adolescent high school type of way. Silly me. Didn't realize what I was missing. It's like the aloof sophomore who doesn't go to the school dance because, they're different than that, and as a result doesn't get to go to the school dance. Dummy. So I'd missed all the great fun stuff that the JVlog people did. I'm going to suffer me, please, just to indulge in that. I missed so much of what the JVlog community was doing in the past because of that attitude that I had. Okay, yes, and I was older than most of the JVloggers by a decade or more. And as a result, I was with a family. So my distractions and my attentions were elsewhere. Plus what would you call it on the scale of maturity? Sounds like the wrong word, but that is the right word. Yeah. Maturity changes our attentions, right? Anyway, back to the point. I've been thinking a lot how lucky I am to be a part of the Gaijin Twitter podcast collective, and I'm doing my best to ensure that I'm worthy of being included, especially given the fact that I'm not in Japan, I'm not currently at Gaijin, and etc., etc. But if you folks, what the hell? Did that come through on the mic? Ugh. Oh, speaking of which, and I have a feeling this is going to turn into a podcast after all. Speaking of which, shivers going through my damn skin. My skin is wrinkled now like a what do you call it? The goosebumps. Please suffer me to dwell a little longer. Wow. I know what that is. It's the pig. There's some hogs in the ranch next door. And that's the hog. I don't know if it's coming through, but something is causing the hog great distress. And now the dogs on that ranch are putting up a clamor. Okay. Okay. So please bear with me while I look backwards a little more. There's one of the another member of the KVLOG community was Scott Ackerman, aka Unrested, who's like me is back in the United States now with one of his sons, and I've been tuning into his lives and saying hello to him and others, and it's nice to be recognized and remembered by Scott. Anyway, he does his Oshoroshi, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Wednesdays horror shows. And so I've been watching them with him, and I've gotten into them myself, and I've been watching Japanese horror, and it's giving me the chills. So when I heard that out there, I hope the pig is okay. It's a formidable hog. I've seen the beast. I think it can handle itself against a coyote, but I don't know what it is up there. Okay, back to the stones. I started this for a reason. I'm not going to make this a podcast. This will not be a podcast. This is simply an interlude. The first stone, I wanted to talk about something that I made a short video earlier, and then Tracy and the collective commented. We have a little group chat going on Twitter, X, that is. And Tracy commented about it. And at the moment that it occurred to me, I thought it, if I do say so myself, quite to the point. So I've started to notice I'm getting, again, maybe it's because I'm recycling old Japan content on my YouTube channel, paving the way, priming the pump for my return and the new content that will come, mainly in the recycling in the form of shorts. I'm getting the comments that I used to get, which sometimes make you scratch your head. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking about one in particular. And I realized, these impressions just come to mind sometimes. I had this vision in my mind of how, initially the thought came about how astronomers can look at the light of a star and they can discern the elements in the star or an exoplanet. They can discern by the atmosphere as the light passes through the atmosphere and what the wavelength changes, or the spectrum changes, it shifts based on the elements that are in the atmosphere of the exoplanet. And they can determine if it's a gas giant or a rocky planet with an atmosphere and what that atmosphere may be. It's an amazing thing. And I was dwelling on the one comment that I got yesterday, I think it was, that made me scratch my head. And it occurred to me that image of the light and how the quality and the character of the light is changed by the thing against which it reflects off of or passes through, just as the light that you're seeing, if you're looking at the video, is for the fires. The flames here are coming off of my face, giving you impressions and information about me, but limited to the quality of the light and the character of what I am and what I'm wearing, etc., right? So you're not seeing a perfect representation of what I am sitting here. You're seeing a quite muted and, dare I say, distorted view. And when I had that thought, a sudden sympathy leapt to mind to the commenter, and I'll explain what the comment was, because it'll help to maybe elucidate my point, which was this, the comment that is. So I'm getting ready to ship my dog Ollie to Japan. What in the world is that? Something's going through the valley. Anyway, I'm getting ready to ship Ollie to Japan next week, and I've talked a lot about it, and I've been preparing for this for like a year, since January. It's what is it? 3/4 of a year. Very complicated and costly process. And I got a comment from someone, one of those comments that makes you scratch your head. And the comment, there's one word in there that got under my skin. And here's the thing. I was talking about how I was going to leave. I was going to take Ollie to Los Angeles International Airport, put him on a plane to Japan. I didn't include a lot of details. A lot of it, I guess, is assumed on my part. And the commenter left the word yikes. And then they went into the saying about how the dog handled the transfer kind of connecting flights and, being on their own, et cetera, et cetera. And then they related a tale about how they had once traveled with a golden retriever on an airplane. And it got under my skin because of the word yikes. And what got under my skin was the fact that, gosh darn it, I've worked really, really hard at this to make sure that my dogs will travel safely to Japan. This is not something I'm undertaking lightly. But then I realized all of a sudden that this person clearly hasn't been following my thread, which is an easy assumption to make on my part, that they've seen everything I've ever posted. They've been following my story for 3/4 of a year. They should know better than to say yikes. As far as I know, this is the first time they've ever seen my commenting about my dogs, and I didn't give them all the background. So after thinking about it for a while, I didn't rush to a response. I responded back and said, "Oh, and yeah, I can understand your feelings." I'm paraphrasing what I said. "I can understand your feeling. By the way, the dog will be I've hired a pet shipping company, which will involve having an agent on both ends, including an agent on the Japan side to usher them through customs. I will. It's a direct flight, so there's no transition." And then I sent that response back, and then the person wrote back, and they were like, "Oh, wow, that really changes things. Wow, direct flight, etc. That shouldn't be such a big deal." So clearly, their impression and their response was based on the lack of total information that they clearly didn't have, and nor should I expect that they would have. Thus, the yikes. That's when I realized that it was like the light reflecting right now dimly off of me. You're not seeing me in a very clear manner. You could assume and fill in the gaps, the black spots, the dark spots that you can't make out with whatever you want. And I realized that what people do is they fill it in with their own stories. Like that one guy, that yikes person, had a comment about traveling with the golden retriever. So I'm sure that whatever difficulties they encountered, that they were able to overcome. In fact, because they were with the dog, they then applied to my story without a human being there. And wow, wouldn't that be worth a yikes? Yes. That's when that realization came to me, and I made a short video. The reason I made the video was more to, codify and remember this thought than anything else. And Tracy over on the Collective from Weekly Fascination podcast commented that was an interesting observation, and he's starting to get such comments himself on his own YouTube channel. So there's more to this. Something then happened this afternoon that hammered this point home so deeply as to ensure that I will never forget this. And I am sorely tempted to find a way to include this in the Good Life Creed, which is my personal recipe for life. Here's what happened. Remember, the idea is that each of us is apprehending the world and receiving limited input based on think about it like the light. The quantity and the quality of the light that we see, and the duration, the amount of the exposure. We don't see a clear or complete picture. We thus fill in the empty spaces with our own impressions, which then maybe create mischief insofar as we misunderstand and we say things that might offend or misunderstand. Here's what happened. Right next to me is my wife's Toyota Prius. I take the dogs Ollie and Rudy every day at the end, except Sunday. I take them to, it's about a 1 hour drive from here in the desert to Julian, California, up in the mountains. Same elevation, 4,600 feet, but it's a desert here and a mountain, pine trees there. Anyway, I take them there for socializing, mainly for the black dog, Ollie, the one that's going to Japan. He's a social dog. Rudy doesn't care, so we won't go so much after he's gone. Anyway, I take them every day, and I have in the back of the Prius, I folded down the back seats, his crate that he will be flying on to Japan. And every day when the reason it's back there is I'm acclimating him to spending time in the crate. So every day when I take him to Julian, I open the hatch in the back and I lure him in with a treat. I throw the treat into the crate. He goes into the crate. I close the door and I leave him in there for a little bit. And he gets used to it. He's to the point now that I can open the door and he'll stay in there. So I roll around with a crate. I drive around with a crate for that purpose, to train Ollie and acclimate him so that next week when he flies to Japan, being in the crate won't be such a big deal. Here's what happened. Here where I live, there's some surrounded, this is a 5-acre ranch. There are 5, 10, and 20-acre ranches all around. And there's about a half-mile dirt road between here and the Chihuahua Valley Road, which is a small 2-lane country road that leads to the bigger highway, 7 miles out. I put the dogs in the car. I did my thing with Ollie in the crate, which I'll later do with Rudy when it's his turn. And off we went. We were rolling down the dirt road, which is a bumpy dirt road, and I realized that the seatbelt that I had fastened around the crate to make sure that it didn't move around had come undone, and the crate was loose. And I was worried that it was going to fall over and onto little Rudy, who likes to ride in the back. So I found a nice place, pulled off to the side of a road, the dirt road that we were on. I stopped the car, got out, went around to the back, lifted the hatch, and the crate was there, and I was fussing with the crate, trying to get the seatbelt back and reestablished on it. I was oblivious to everything happening around me. The 2 boys were in the front seat, barking away. Rudy was barking away, as he always does when he's anxious. He was anxious because we had stopped, so I didn't notice anything coming. There I was in the back, fiddling with the crate, when suddenly I noticed another car, and there's not a lot of cars on this road, so it's amazing that this happened. A white car pulled up right next to me, literally right next to me, and the driver's side window was down. And there's man, excuse me, let me take a drink. There was a man, probably 10 years my senior, so maybe 70, full beard, looked like Santa Claus with glasses. He had his window down in his kind of a beat up old car. I'd seen him before. I know who he is. I know which ranch he lives on. He's the master of a big 10-acre ranch around here. And I looked over at him, and the first word out of his voice, with steel in the voice, I'm trying to find a way to convey this, was, "What are you doing?" In a very accusing tone, directed right at me. He didn't recognize me. He didn't know who I was, nor would I expect him to. I'm just a temporary visitor, so to speak, here in this tiny house. I was a bit taken back. I didn't put anything together, except that I expected that he saw me as a stranger in his road. "What are you doing?" Without thinking, I just simply said, "Oh, my crate came undone, and I stopped to secure it so that it wouldn't fall over on my dog." Immediately, he issued forth, I couldn't even finish the sentence as soon as he realized what I was up to. Immediately he said, "Oh, I thought maybe you were dumping dogs." I was so taken aback by that idea that I might be doing that I was tongue-tied. I couldn't think of anything to say, and immediately his car began to move, and I'm happy with what I got out of my mouth, because what I got out of and he must have seen in my face, I was so horrified by the idea because that is, to me, that is the horror of horrors. Anybody that would take dogs and dump them in the middle of nowhere is deserving of some layer of hell, if such a thing exists. And to suddenly have been accused of doing said hellacious act left me speechless. But I'm proud of what I said. My training, I train myself every day with my Good Life Creed to have good emotional reactions. And the first words that came out of my mouth were, even though I wasn't mad at the man. The first words that came out of my mouth, that might have sounded strange to him, were, "Thank you." And then I started to say, because it all clicked to me all at once, was, I can see how you might have thought that was the case. Because suddenly realizing it, putting it into perspective, what he saw as a resident of this thing, he's coming along, he saw a car, he's probably never seen my car, because like I said, there's not a lot of cars, we don't see one another. He's never seen my car, but certainly a strange car, not the kind of car you typically see out here in the middle of nowhere, parked in a very nondescript place. The place I had picked to pull over to the side was exactly where you would pick to park to dump a dog. No ranchers could see it, nothing else. And I had picked it simply because it was easy. If a car happened to come along, they could easily get around. There I am, and he could see the dogs as you approached. He could see the dogs yipping and yapping in the window in the front of the car, and he could see me with the hatch open doing something in the back. And I have heard that people do dump dogs in these kind of places. So, of course, remember about the light and the impression and the partiality of the picture, like the man that thought that I was shipping a dog that had on an airplane that had connecting flight with no human to make sure that they get on their connecting flights, and he warrants his yikes. This man's comment of "what are you doing" was perfectly warranted, and in fact, the right thing to do. I admire his courage in coming forth and boldly saying that. And I'm happy that the words that came out of my mouth were "thank you." And I started to say, I could certainly see how you would think this, but he was already pulling away because he was embarrassed by the accusation that he had given and the assumption that he had made. And I was embarrassed that I had been thought out to be somebody like that, and deeply appreciative of the fact that he was a man that cared enough to say something and stop and do something about it. But in the end, I felt horrible. The rest of my drive to Julian was one of just thinking and mulling over the whole thing like some guilty man. And I had to remind myself, Kurt, you weren't dumping dogs. You were just making sure it was safe. But the very fact that I had been thought to be that way. And this illustrated exactly what was going on with the man or the person that had left the comment, "Yikes," about my dogs. It was the exact same thing. I was taking on the aspect of someone who could do such a thing and feeling guilty about it when it was not warranted. So now, let me take another sip. I'm going to begin using this perspective when it comes to the comments that I get on social media. A small percentage of the people that leave comments are indeed assholes, but not a lot of them. Most of them are simply saying things reflecting the light that they see from my situation that they see in an imperfect sense due to my sharing, and they're reflecting it and filtering it through their own experience and sharing it back. That's all it is. Like the man with that stopped at the side of the road and the man commenting on my dogs. Not malicious. In fact, mostly they're trying to be helpful. I would like to fold this realization and this perspective into my creed to keep me remembering this on a going forward basis. I will endeavor to do so. Boy, I spent a lot of time talking about this, didn't I? The fire died down. The dogs are at rest. The pig seems to be at peace. One rock complete. But, as I said, this is not a podcast. I don't think I need to fill out any more rocks. I'll put those aside. Save the rocks for next Thursday. Thanks for joining me for a listen. Be safe, but not too safe. Take care.